suspects are being. One case involves the FBI is now offering $100,000 to see if the police are releasing.
Welcome to Misty Mysteries, a true crime podcast where once a week on Wednesday, I bring you a true crime case about an unsolved murder or missing persons. This week, my true crime fact for the week is a person can be declared legally dead after 7 years of being listed as a missing person. This time can be reduced in certain situations like natural or mass disasters. This week, I'm going to be talking about the case of Wilma June Nissen. This week's episode was brought to me by Wilma's daughter, Chrissy, who has asked for help to share Wilma's story in hopes to bring her justice. Have you heard of Anchor? Anchor is the easiest way to make a podcast. When I started Misty Mysteries, I didn't know where to go, and Anchor helped me get Misty Mysteries started without charging me an arm and a leg. Anchor is really my suggestion for anyone looking to start a podcast. It has tools that allow you to record and edit in-app or on the website. Anchor distributes your podcasts on all the listening places such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Good Pods, and all your favorite listening places. It's everything you need to make a podcast all in one place, and best of all, it's totally free, all on Anchor FM and on the Anchor app. Wilma June Nissen was born October 19th, 1954, to June and Charles Nissen in San Francisco, California. Wilma had two sisters, Mary, who passed away shortly after birth, and Mona, who was born deaf. When Wilma was 8, her mother, June, left the family, leaving the girls to be raised by Charles. Charles neglected the girls, and he didn't allow Wilma or Mona to go to school. While he worked, he would lock the girls in the closet till he got home. This was until he lost his job and had to move the family into his car, and during this time, Wilma would have to spend her days looking for food on the streets while Mona was locked in the car trunk. In December 1964, when Wilma was 10, the police took the girls out of Charles' care, sending Wilma to live in a foster home with Maxine and Marshall Holt. Maxine and Marshall Holt would describe Wilma as a happy, bubbly child who learned quickly, despite the neglect she did receive earlier in life. Wilma stayed in the Holt's home for 2 years before Maxine became unable to take care of her due to rheumatoid arthritis. Wilma went to other foster homes, but the Holts would stay in contact with her and visit her for birthdays and days at the park. Wilma's final foster home came when she was a teen in 1966 with Alice and Vince Haas, who she stayed with till she was 18, when Wilma just went for a walk and never came home. At the age of 18, on August 15th, 1973, she married a man by the name of Donald Wellington. During this marriage, Wilma had to turn to prostitution to survive, adding an arrest to her record in 1974 in Long Beach. During this marriage, she also met another man named Michael, who she got pregnant with and had a son named Michael Jr. Michael Jr. ended up in foster care, and there isn't a confirmed story, but it's believed Michael Sr., Wilma, and Michael Jr. were hitchhiking to Key West, Florida, when Michael Jr. was taken into foster care. Michael Sr. continued to Key West, but Wilma stayed in California, where she then got pregnant with her husband Donald. They had a son named Donald Jr. who was born premature. Looking at this timeline with her pregnancies seemed too close together, but when you think about Donald Jr. being born premature, it kind of makes more sense. But Donald Jr. was also taken into foster care, and I couldn't find those details, but Wilma ended up in San Diego, where she met a man named Robert Irvin. She married Robert on June 21st, 1977, and had a daughter with him in August 18th, 1977. They named her Crystal Joy Irvin. Crystal was born premature and eventually ended up in a foster care system where she was adopted by Wilma's foster parents, Vince and Alice Haas. Wilma ended up leaving California in February 1978 for Atlanta, Georgia, with a man named Charles Inman Built, where they lived with his mom in an apartment. Shortly after getting to the apartment in Atlanta, Wilma left, making Charles the last known person to see Wilma. On October 4th, 1978, a telephone company employee was working on cables in Loyne County, Iowa, when he found a woman's body in a ditch 20 feet from a gravel road covered by weeds. The woman was laying face down on the ground. She was wearing light green denim pants with white leather calf-length boots. She had a silver ring with gold indents on her ring finger, but she was naked from the waist up. Her feet were also tied together with a braided rope, and her face was in a state of decomposition past the point of identification. Her lower jaw was missing and only had 2 teeth. A team swept the area for her jaw, but couldn't find her jaw, teeth, or any further evidence besides what was on the body. The rope found on her was believed to use to drag her body from the car to the ditch where she was left, and this came to conclusion due to a dislocation of her cervical vertebrae and the position of her body. A detective was quoted saying, "That's why her arms come forward, her hands are forward, and her hair is forward. The body is being dragged by the feet into the ditch. To me, it's an obvious sign that the body is deceased being dragged face down." When the woman's body was examined, a cause of death couldn't be found, but the death timeline was around July or August, 2 to 3 months before she was found. The woman was buried at Jane Doe in Riverview Cemetery in Rock Rapids, Iowa. Jane Doe's case was worked, but without an identification, it was hard to catch who killed the woman until 2001, when Loyne County Sheriff's Blythe Blomendale was elected and was determined to solve her case, saying, "It's a homicide. It happened in my county. This is my job. I will not drop it." Due to the sheriff's determination, in January 2006, over 20 years later, her fingerprints were found to match to Wilma June Nissen by a laboratory tech, using her fingerprints taken at the time that her body was found and the time of her arrest in Long Beach. 24 hours later, daughter Chrissy, with the help of a family friend, Starley Patterson, who has been helping Chrissy find her biological mother, Wilma, was able to claim her mother by faxing a photo of her to the police and a DNA test to confirm she was her daughter. In 2007, Wilma was exhumed in hopes to find more DNA evidence to help solve her case, but unfortunately, Jane and John Doe's aren't buried in the best coffins, and she was exhumed on a very rainy day, leading to water hurting the chance of strong DNA evidence. The sheriff's department turned to Wilma's clothes found on her that day for DNA evidence. Samples from Wilma's remains and her clothes and her fingernails, which were all sent to Iowa's Division of Criminal Investigation Laboratory to create a DNA profile that was sent to the FBI laboratory CODIS. CODIS is a system by the FBI that generates leads using DNA evidence found during crimes to match it to a convicted sex offender. A forensic anthropologist during this time that she was exhumed was able to determine the cause of death, but it was never shared outside of the case. It wasn't until 2 years later, in 2009, when some more progress was made in Wilma's case. John Van Gierman was arrested on 6 counts of perjury. The charges came from a statement that he made when the police questioned him about Wilma's murder. His home was also searched by police, but John was never named a suspect. His charges were dropped in 2010 when John was 83 years old. Now, for Wilma's case, there aren't a lot of theories out there, but more of one solid lead. In 2016, a picture of a female suspect was released to the public. Her name wasn't released, but it's believed she's an escort who worked with Wilma named Sugar. Sugar was known to rob other female escorts. She worked with another who goes by the name of Peaches. No pictures of Peaches have been released, but police believe the two women killed Wilma with a motive of robbery. No arrests have been made since the release of the pictures and the information on Sugar and Peaches, but we hope police can bring justice not only for Wilma all these years later, but her daughter Chrissy and the family that she did leave behind, who are still fighting to bring awareness to Wilma's life and her case. If you have any information about the murder of Wilma June Nissen, you can contact Detective Amy Stoner at the Loyne County Sheriff's at 712-472-8336 or email at amy.stoner@loynecountyia.com. There is a $10,000 reward for information that leads to the arrest and conviction of Wilma's killer. Tippers can also remain anonymous. You can find all information to contact Detective Amy Stoner in the episode's description. You will also have all the links to all the sources as well, and a page ran by Wilma's daughter Chrissy to bring attention to her mother's case. If you are a fellow podcaster, Chrissy welcomes you to cover her case on your podcast or YouTube channel. I would like to thank you for listening. If you like this podcast, please share it with friends, family, and on social media, and leave a good review for this podcast. You can find the podcast on social media at Instagram, Misty, MISTY _mysteries, MYSTERIES, or Twitter at Mysteries Misty, MYSTERIES MISTY. If you would like to suggest a case to this podcast, you can email the podcast at keelsart@gmail.com. This is KEELSLART@gmail.com. All links and information can be found in the episode's description. I'd like to thank you for listening, and I'd like to thank my sources, and I'll see you guys next week.